Welcome tonight, we step into silence, not the peaceful silence of a monastery, but the eerie hush of empty streets, where the shutters are closed, and the air carries a heavy, invisible weight. This is Europe, the 14th century, and the plague has arrived. But we won't follow the nobles, or the merchants fleeing the city gates. We'll walk with the one who stays behind. The man in the long coat, the bird mask, the soft leather gloves, the plague doctor, not a healer, not really. More of a witness, an official observer of death. Let your breath soften, and imagine waking at dawn, in a house that doesn't feel like home, because it isn't. It's simply the house where the plague has not reached. Yet, why it sucked to be a plague doctor. The sun is pale, the sky hazy, and the wind smells of smoke and rot. You rise slowly, not from a soft bed, but from a stiff straw mattress in the corner of a rented room. You're a plague doctor, not by choice, but by contract. The city hired you, not because you're the best, but because you were willing. You don't live among the people, you live near the gates, where the sick are sent to die. You begin by preparing your gear, not armor, but it feels like it. First, the thick waxed coat. Hot, stiff, and heavy, then the gloves, then the boots, then the mask. You fasten it carefully. The long beak is packed with herbs, lavender, rose petals, mint. They do nothing, but they give you something to breathe besides despair. Through the tiny glass eye, the world becomes narrow and dim. You carry a stick, not to fight, but to examine bodies without touching them. Some days, it's just paperwork. You count the dead, list their names, seal the house. Other days, it's worse. You knock gently, no one answers. You push the door, and inside, a silence that isn't peace, just absence. You do not cry. You do not pray, you just record. Sometimes, a family begs you to help, but you have no cure. Only a vinegar-soaked rag. A charm, a hollow voice behind a mask. The city pays you a few coins a week. It is not much, but they promise lodging, and later, burial. You eat alone, sleep lightly, and avoid mirrors, because even you are starting to forget what your face looks like. The scholar who watched the world burn, his name was Ibn al-Wardi, a Syrian scholar, a geographer, a chronicler. He lived not in a plague-ridden alley, but in the bustling city of Aleppo. And as the Black Death crept across the known world, he did something many could not. He wrote, not with panic, not with poetry, but with precision. He described the sickness as it came, double quotes, ... It begins with swellings in the groin and armpit. It spreads like fire in dry grass. He noted the names of the cities that fell silent, the ships that arrived with no crew left alive, the markets that emptied. He didn't write from safety. He wrote from inside the wave. Other scholars had fled. Courts had closed. Mosques were quiet. But Ibn al-Wardi stayed. He interviewed travelers, read letters from distant towns, and documented the collapse of trade, the crumbling of trust, the fear in every corner of society. He died shortly after writing his account, but not before leaving behind one of the most honest records of the plague's path through the Islamic world. No emotion, just quiet detail. And in that detail, a kind of calm, because even as the world burned, one man was still watching, still remembering, still writing it down for those of us who would come later. The mass graves beneath the fields in the countryside, where bells once marked the hour and plows carved steady furrows. The rhythm broke. The plague did not strike all at once. It crept, farm to farm, village to village, and when it came, there was often no one left to bury the dead. The records speak softly of it. They call them pits or communal burials, but the earth remembers more. Centuries later, archaeologists would dig in what looked like ordinary meadows, and beneath them rows of bones, stacked gently, facing no direction, sometimes wrapped in linen, sometimes not. In England, at a site near Charterhouse, a field yielded over 500 bodies, men, women, children, all buried quickly, not by priests, but by survivors too weak to pray. Some of the bodies still wore buckles. Some had coins beneath the tongue. One, a child, was found with a small wooden toy held tightly in one hand. Not all graves were orderly. Some were simply trenches, dug in haste. A wagon of bodies dumped in, then covered by nightfall. But even in this, there was a strange reverence. Sometimes, a sprig of rosemary. Sometimes, a tablet with a name. No monuments were raised, no tombs carved, just soft earth, and the quiet weight of those. the world could not carry, and as the fields greened again and time passed, the bones settled, waiting until centuries later, when the wind shifted and the past breathed again. The wealthy who tried to escape death in the cities, the poor died first, tightly packed, hungry, unseen. But as the bells tolled louder, the wealthy began to move. They boarded wagons, closed their estates, gathered servants and food, and fled to the countryside. They called it self-preservation. They called it wisdom, but they could not outrun the air. In Italy, nobles retreated to walled villas. In France, lords rode to remote forests. In England, manor houses sealed their gates. Only the most essential servants remained. Food was stored, letters burned. They tried remedies, perfumed cloth, crushed emerald, fasting, flagellation. Some held banquets, reasoning that if death would come, they'd at least greet it with full cups. Others turned to silence, shutting windows, avoiding all speech, moving through their estates like ghosts among the living. The Decameron, written during the plague, tells of 10 nobles fleeing to the hills, spending their days telling stories to keep despair away. But even there, the fear was constant. A servant sneezed. A fever rose. One by one, the firelight dimmed. Death did not care for silk or bloodlines. It passed beneath gold-threaded curtains, as easily as it passed through barn doors. And when the cities opened again, many of those grand homes stood empty, clean, quiet. But the air remembered, and those who returned often whispered that the silence inside was heavier than the plague itself. A mask without a face, the plague doctor was not a savior. He was not a hero, nor a villain. He was simply a presence, moving from door to door, room to room, with nothing to offer but witness. He wore the mask not to hide, but to endure, to put a layer between his soul and what he could not stop. He had no cure, no power, just ink and time. And as the world darkened, he wrote how many died, where they lay, who begged, who fled. And when his own breath grew shallow, he placed the stylus beside his glove, and vanished quietly into the same silence he had walked through for months. The mask remained. It would be worn again, in new plagues, by new men, facing old fears. But the truth is, the plague doctor did not fight death. He walked beside it, marked its passing, and made sure we would not forget. So tonight, as you close your eyes, remember that not all heroes raise swords. Some simply write things down, and in doing so, they leave behind a kind of peace. Good night and sleep well. With quiet history,